I feel like I'm very far away, but I kind of like it, especially for this. I mean, look at that. Oh. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Dion, and I'm filming in the afternoon, which I almost never do. It's actually technically evening, it's like 5 o'clock. I'm a morning filmer, but I just really don't want to wake up early tomorrow. So we're doing it now, and today we are going to be talking about a fashion aesthetic that I have been wanting to do for a really long time. Like, it's been on my list just because I personally love it, but I wanted to wait until like mid-summer, late summer to do it, and that is the FairyGrunge slash Whimsigoth aesthetic. Now, FairyGrunge was more popular last year, Whimsigoth is happening more this year, but I'm choosing to do them together because I find that they are so similar. There's just like very minor things that are different, like dark academia, light academia. You're still under the umbrella of academia. So I feel like these two are so similar that I just want to put them together. And because FairyGrunge was more last year and Whimsigoth is more this year, that's what we're doing. So if you like style analysis videos, definitely subscribe to my channel because I post videos every Thursday and I love doing niche fashion aesthetics. With that, let's get into it. Your eyes flutter open as the sunlight drips into your room through the gauzy windows. Your black cat meows for food as you welcome in the day. You throw on whatever is on the floor, a long skirt, a mesh top, a lacy cami, and a couple of your favorite crystal necklaces and rings. After drinking your morning cup of tea, you grab your tote bag and head to the woods for some foraging for the solstice. The smell of moss and wet leaves fill your nostrils as you find some rare mushrooms. You spot fairy circles and hear siren songs as you travel through the forest. At dusk, you light your candles, set out your materials for the spell, take a deep breath, and focusing on harnessing your power. So what is FairyGrunge slash Whimsigoth? It's essentially mixing like traditional 90s edgy goth grunge vibes with sort of a cottagecore vibe, and then adding in like earthy and witchy pieces. So it's like if you smash Twilight and cottagecore and then throw in like grunge, that's sort of the vibe that we're going for. I feel like I'm really pulling it off with my dark lipstick. I'm wearing Trixie Cosmetics, her Trixie palette from the gymnastics collection or whatever on my eyes, and Cherry Chip from Trixie Cosmetics. Highly recommend. I'm a big Trixie Cosmetics fan if you guys didn't know. And this is from a small like a local boutique in Newport, Rhode Island called Taste of India. It doesn't have a tag on it, but my friends and I got matching ones. So just because I know you guys are gonna ask. So it's very much like 90s vibes mixed with like boho fairy vibes. Hi, there's no food in here. I'll put it over there, but there's no food, so don't make noise. So I think of like, okay, if you guys, I'm so into Halloween. Okay, first of all, I hit 4,000 subscribers today, literally 5 minutes ago, which is insane. So thank you for that. And I only had, so, okay. Hi, it's a little bit too loud, hun, and there's no food in there? So I don't know if we're gonna do that. This time last year, I had like 100 subscribers. So if you guys don't know, I'm a freak for Halloween. I'm a freak for autumn. Autumn videos are gonna be starting in August. I'm not kidding. And they're gonna happen until Christmas. And then I'm gonna pretend Christmas doesn't happen. Sorry about it. But if you guys remember last year, really popular, like the, like this decor from Joann's and Michael's, like they kind of went in this like witchy, occult, what do they call it? I feel like they called it something last year. FairyGrunge, but like this vibe, that's what we're going for. We're trying to look like we're a witch in the 90s. Very Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the OG series, very Charmed, all of that. So I'm trying to find that example of the Michaels decor from last year. Like, for some reason I couldn't find it on their website yet, but I literally started crying because I just love Halloween so much. And I'm just so excited for Halloween season. So you want to look at like rocks, stones, forests, woods, walking paths, abandoned houses, earthy tones, torn clothes, being in the outdoors. The home decor often references Renaissance style vintage furniture, thick velvet fabrics, crystals, candles, heavyset curtains, collections of trinkets, stained glassware, plants, herbs, incense burners, and cats, particularly black cats. Like I said, I'm reading from an article from Nylon that talked about Whimsigoth. It's like the edgier older sister of cottagecore, but softer than more gothic aesthetics, like mixing chunky black shoes with floaty sleeves and a long mesh overlay skirt. The same escapism vibe, but darker and more mystical. And I agree with that little tidbit from Nylon. And as always, I love hearing what you guys have to say about the aesthetics that I cover. So this is from my Instagram. Every week I ask y'all on my Instagram what you think of the aesthetics. So I asked, like, what movies and TV shows do you guys think give this vibe? The Craft, yes. Truly, I saw that movie for the first time last year. I don't know how I missed it. Neve Campbell, my all-time girl crush of all time. I love it. Charmed, another 90s show. Practical Magic, 90s movie. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, obviously. Another person said Practical Magic. Another person said Buffy. Charmed are probably the most classic. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Someone said the movie Labyrinth, which I didn't think of. The Vampire Diaries. Again, Sabrina, both the Teenage Witch and the Chilling Adventures, but the OG 90s Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Sabrina's room is like exactly what you're going for. Beetlejuice, the movie, I totally get that. And something that no one said that I totally forgot, none of the articles mentioned and none of the, like, nobody mentioned here, but when I was making this video, Halloween Town, bitch. Are you kidding me? Marnie Cromwell. First of all, my cat, Marnie, is named after Marnie Cromwell. Everything about Whimsigoth is about moons and stars and suns. Her collar and her harness to go outside have moons and stars on them because she is literally a witch. She was born October 23rd. Yeah, icon. I love Marnie Cromwell, but that is like totally Whimsigoth. I think because it's a Disney movie, people just don't think of it. And then I said, what characters, celebrities, or influencers come to mind when you think of this? Someone said Helena Bonham Carter. My friend said this is subtle, but Lorde kind of gives that vibe, which I definitely get. FKA Twigs, for sure. Her street style can be very fairy grunge, very Whimsigoth. Someone said Rasputina and Annie DeFranco. Throw in some Tori Amos in. Not gonna lie, don't know who a lot of those people are, but I'll have pictures of them here. Princess Nokia, Jean Aiko, I'm sorry, Stevie Nicks, Florence Welch, definitely, I mean, Stevie Nicks, the White Witch, Florence and the Machine, totally get that. And then I said, tell me your real feelings about the aesthetic. Some people said TikTok kind of overdid it, which I feel like it wasn't that popular. So I don't know, maybe just not on my side of TikTok, but I really liked it. My dog is humping his pillow, so if you hear jingling, y'all know the drill. Like the 4,000 people, like you guys have seen my videos, you know my dog's always humping a pillow in the background. But I find this aesthetic so cute, I want to incorporate more of these pieces in my closet. Someone said it reminds me of Bella from Twilight, I don't know why, and I totally get that. It definitely gives Bella Swan and Elena Gilbert vibes. Love it, but it's not feasible for my life. Girl, you can wear whatever you want, whatever stage of life. Look at me. One of my friends said, it reminds me of my best friend's older sister growing up, witchy mixed with punk vibes, which is like, I love it. I love the witchy vibes. Someone said, I really love it. I enjoy the whimsical escapist nature of it. Totally agree. And the last person said, like a blast from the past that I was never aware existed. That's why it's great when these aesthetics get labeled. And I agree, like this, I wouldn't have had like a word for this aesthetic of like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Marnie Cromwell. I called it like 90s Halloween. Like that is my favorite type of like Halloween genre, Halloween decorations, Halloween everything. And that this definitely like fits in. Now we're gonna get into the staples of fairy grunge slash Whimsigoth. Don't knock over my light. Okay. This is why I don't like filming in the afternoon, because when I film at 5 a.m. he just sleeps the whole time. So before I get into sort of like the staples and everything, I'm not gonna fix the light, I don't care. Fairy grunge is like, and Whimsigoth are very, very similar. Whimsigoth is more witchy. Fairy grunge is more fairy-like. So with Whimsigoth, think of like deep reds, purples, crimsons, hunter greens, those like more jewel tones, whereas FairyGrunge sticks with more earth tones. But there's a lot of overlap, so like mossy greens, browns, black, etc. Beiges, sprinkles of deep purple and red. But I feel like with Whimsigoth and FairyGrunge, there is quite a strict color palette. I mean, it's very dark colors naturally, lots of earth and jewel tones. You don't really see pastels or neons or even just primary colors. It sticks very much in those earthy jewel tones. The likes of the FairyGrunge or the Whimsigoth gal: magic, crystals, herbs, crochet, mushroom foraging, painting, doing ethereal makeup, reading, hanging out with their cat or rabbit. I feel like FairyGrunge and Whimsigoth girls, they have cats, rabbits, ferrets, lizards, frogs, and I feel like they're not dog people. But I don't know, maybe. Icons of this aesthetic: Phoebe from Friends. I hate the show Friends. I've only seen like a couple episodes. It's really not my humor. But from what I've seen of Phoebe's style and like looking it up, I feel like that is a big like influence. Obviously, like we said, the ladies of Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Bella Swan, Elena Gilbert, Stevie Nicks, Florence Welch, the ladies from The Craft, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, FK Twigs, Helena Bonham Carter, 90s era Lisa Bonet, Marnie Cromwell, and Misty Day from American Horror Story are all great examples of this like earthy swamp witch aesthetic. Oh, are you kidding? I'm a girl from Florida that loves Halloween, so I'm nutting for this aesthetic. This might be probably my favorite aesthetic that we've done so far, in my opinion. Look at my outfit, look at the makeup. I just love it. Bonnie from The Vampire Diaries. Also, I don't know how I forgot her. She's literally a witch. See? Internal biases. I'm focusing on the white girl when we literally have a person of color witch in the show. Always learning. Where do the Whimsigoths hang out? Where do the FairyGrunge gals hang out? The FairyGrunge peeps hang out. They like going to forests, a wooded glen, crystal shops, old bookstores, caves, basements, in a tree, behind the school bleachers doing spells. You know, these are sort of maybe aloof, shy, outcast, a little bit weird. Insert, we are the weirdos.
Girls, watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Sort of, it's not a very, if we think of like coquette is very flirty and putting yourself out there and coy and like, ooh, whatever. Messy French girl, a rock star girlfriend, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more sultry, a little bit more sexy. Old Money is sort of that quiet confidence, that snobbery aspect, and like FairyGrunge, Whimsigoth is like, ooh, who's that girl wearing like dark purple lipstick in the corner wearing all black? Like it's those people. Like I said, I feel like it's the girls from The Craft, sort of like outcasts in a way. Staples of the Whimsigoth / fairycore or FairyGrunge aesthetic are velvet, lace, corsets, maxi skirts, floral, paisley, maxi dresses, sheer tops, bell sleeve, submersive basics, shrugs. So a lot of like influences from 90s tops, mesh and shrugs and all of those things. Then again, like bell sleeves, flowy things, that type of vibe. I feel like, because like fairycore sort of came out from cottagecore, of like, we're gonna take cottagecore, but instead of being humans that live on a farm, we're fairies that live in the farm. And then like fairycore, I feel like the goth girls were like, well, I wanna be a fairy, but like, I don't wanna be like Tinkerbell. So they made like FairyGrunge. And then like the Halloween witchy bitches are like, well, I like that, but I'm not a fairy, I'm a witch. And so they got Whimsigoth. That's sort of like the timeline, I feel like. I'm casting a spell. Shoes for the FairyGrunge Whimsigoth gals. First things first, I mean, especially for FairyGrunge girl, it's all about the bare feet. That's all you're gonna see for free of my feet. Yeah, I mean, bare feet or like strappy brown sandals, honestly like brown flip-flops for like the FairyGrunge gals. I think like if you're doing FairyGrunge, you wanna be like earthing, you wanna be grounding yourself, you wanna be feeling the dirt between your toes. For Whimsigoth, I mean, is there anything more witchy than a long skirt or dress and boots? I mean, come on, like that is the witch uniform. So like big platform Docs, Doc Martens in general, Daria boots, combat boots in general, maybe like a chunky platform sandal, like Doc Martens has some, Demonias, but For the Whimsigoth and even like the FairyGrunge, you want to add, I feel like you want to go punk with your shoes. That's where you add in that grunge or goth aspect to the fairy and whimsy aesthetic. You, not only in the color palette, but you add it like with all the flowy fabrics and the more feminine silhouettes of long skirts, long dresses, you add in that edge with your accessories, most importantly, your shoes. Speaking of accessories, in the Whimsigoth fairy grunge look, there is a lot of layered jewelry, a lot of like crystal necklaces, crystal rings, funky makeup, especially from the fairy grunge gals. I feel like with Whimsigoth, it's a little bit more smudgy, a little bit more natural, a little bit more 90s, maybe with a dark lip. But fairy grunge, something that I love about it is the makeup that these people do is just so fun and pretty. And I just like love when people just do their makeup like a mushroom fairy and then just go out to Publix. That's rad. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your service. I know it's all gays and girls. Thank you. Tote bag. These are definitely tote bag gals. I mean, they're carrying around crystals, they're carrying around mushrooms, they're carrying around their spell book, they're carrying around their journal, Sylvia Plath, the bell jar, you know. They need a tote bag. They're not gonna go anywhere without a tote bag. Leg and arm warmers are also very common, very 90s. This whole style is very much about like layering a lot and sort of how the silhouette is disheveled, but we'll get into that later. Of course, we're gonna go over some of the criticisms, and I'm gonna just quote this paragraph from the Nylon magazine just to sort of start us off. It is crucial to note that the controversy and cultural appropriation that is also aligned with Western cultures capitalizing on astrology in a harmful way to indigenous communities. The rising popularity of Whimsigoth does lack extensive diversity and size-inclusive representation, which will hopefully change with more people having access to the style through the internet. Witchcraft in general has been synonymous with the oppression of the patriarchy that women and girls have faced and continued to endure. So from a fashion standpoint, I don't have that much to say about this aesthetic in terms of like criticisms, because when we think of like 2010s boho, that was incredibly appropriative. That was cosplaying as Romani people, that was stealing indigenous headdresses for the aesthetic. And FairyGrunge and Whimsigoth take those bohemian influences, but they make it just way less appropriative and just sort of distance themselves from the traditional bohemian look. I know we've kind of talked about the evolution of the bohemian style, and it does definitely sometimes seep into appropriation and all of that. And I think FairyGrunge and Whimsigoth do a good job at distancing themselves from that. In terms of size diversity, maybe it's because of my algorithm, but I found that like FairyGrunge and Whimsigoth, at least with my algorithm, did a good job at showing me a good amount of diverse representation. As always, I have to do some digging for plus size and people of color. And that's just, you know, the shitty part of social media algorithms. But the icons of the aesthetic that we just discussed a few minutes ago, there were, what, did I mention like 3 people of color in that entire thing? So I guess my problem is less about the fashion aesthetic, but what the fashion aesthetic inspires, which is crystals, spells, herbs, saging, that type of thing. JJ, you're about to knock into my light again. There's nothing necessarily bad about practicing witchcraft or Wicca or any of that. It's that crystals and spirituality have become more popular in the last decade, and traditional indigenous practices have been taken over and co-opted by like white people. So think of like white sage. Oh my god, I gotta sage my home. I'm in LA, I need to sage my home, whatever. I've used white sage before I was educated on it, not knowing that for decades that indigenous people were barred from practicing their religion using white sage. They use it for a spiritual practice, and then white girls are buying it off of Amazon and now taking away those resources for actual religious indigenous practices. So not only was it against the law for them to practice those religious practices, but when it's not against the law, all those resources are being taken away and people aren't buying from indigenous sellers and ethical sellers. And with crystals, I mean, people just like color quartz and call it and call it something else. In a purely clothing sense, it's much better than the original boho that took directly from Romani and indigenous cultures. So my main criticism is less about the clothing and more about how when spiritual / witchy aesthetics become popular, so does the practice of spirituality and witchcraft or Wicca. And then people start taking from different cultures with maybe not educating themselves, maybe not supporting those cultures financially by buying from people in those cultures rather than just like buying from Gwyneth Paltrow on Goop or something. Many cultures have their own form of witchcraft or indigenous practices or spirituality, etc. Indigenous Irish folks, Gaelic, Celtic, they have sort of their own vibe with fairies and leprechauns and everything. Nordic folks have their own kind of Wicca pagan practice. So paganism, that's actually the phrase I'm looking for. So that's been widespread all over Europe, and spiritual practices dealing with stones, crystals, herbs, smokes, etc. Are popularized among so many different indigenous cultures. So it's not that like white people can't practice witchcraft. It's more so like when you are choosing to do those things, like you don't need to co-opt other people's culture while doing it, and you don't need to like you just want to make sure like if you want to get into the spells and this type of practice, which I totally support. I'm a crystal girl. I used to be super into herbs, crystals, all of that, so I'm not against it. But just like inquire who you're buying it from, where they're sourcing their materials, what are their values, who do the people look like that are shopping at that store. Just like be aware, because if it's gonna be a spiritual practice for you, you wanna go in with like a clear conscience. You don't wanna start your spiritual practice off with like stolen white sage, if that makes sense. European countries have like a ton of different witchy practices, so we don't need to co-opt Hispanic or Black or indigenous communities. We can learn from each other, we can exchange, but we don't need to like steal and call it our own, like the white sage thing or whatever. We don't need to steal other people's culture and then call it our own Whimsigoth or etc. Does that make sense? Yeah, the fashion aesthetic itself, I don't really have a problem with. It's that like what this fashion aesthetic is like, ooh, get spiritual, get witchy, blah, blah. And sometimes people don't fully educate themselves in those spiritual practices and they end up just doing some kind of icky things. There's a lot of that sort of nuance on TikTok. So if you are interested in like what are good like books to buy to educate yourself more or practices, etc. There's a lot of info out there, and I highly recommend if you are wanting to transition this aesthetic into more of a lifestyle. Yeah, just be like with everything, just kind of ask yourself, who's shopping here, who owns it, where do they source their materials from, what do their values seem like, and then you make your executive decision from there. So now we are going to get the look of how to thrift and create a Whimsigoth fairy grunge outfit. Alright, so we want to remember the color palette and the silhouette. I feel like those things are really key. Similar to when we talked about the original grunge, it's about originality. You don't want to just copy exactly Kurt Cobain's outfit. It's supposed to look disheveled, it's supposed to look not fashion. And FairyGrunge is sort of an offshoot or a baby of the grunge movement. So you wanna, you don't need to copy exactly everything. There's no such thing as a perfect FairyGrunge outfit or Whimsigoth outfit because it's supposed to be semi-haphazard. You wanna keep everything in the earth tones, jewel tones, keep everything flowy and a bit tattered. You wanna look like a fire hazard. Like your clothing should light up in flames if someone lights a cigarette around you. Like, yeah, you wanna look like a fire hazard. For bottoms, you wanna stick with skirts and long dresses. It's so quintessentially witchy to do a long skirt, long dress with boots. If you're not comfortable with the skirt, they do have these sort of like flowy types of pants that sort of mimic the movement of a skirt. So maybe that's more in your comfort zone rather than just going full maxi skirt at the front end. You want, again, keep in mind the color palette. You wanna look out for like floral patterns, dark psychedelic patterns, paisley, again, the submersive basics with submersive, with the stitching and everything. Handkerchief hemmed skirts would be awesome. Those are very popular in like the 2000s. For tops, I feel like the starter for a fairy grunge or whimsy goth outfit is long skirt, tiny top, and then you do layers on top of it. So tiny tops, little halters, little camis, lacy camis, tube tops, and then you layer on the shrug, the mesh top, the cardigan, a flowy open shirt, anything with flowy sleeves. But that silhouette of like long skirt, tiny thing, and then something flowy on top, which is ironically my summer uniform. Tiny top with a maxi skirt and flip-flops is literally what I wear every single day. So for the tops, this should be relatively easy when you're at a thrift store, just going through like the tiny tops, the sleeveless tops or the tank tops, and looking for things that are in those earth tones that have those patterns, maybe have lace detailing or the submersive stitching, that type of thing. For accessories, when you're going into a thrift store, look for like kind of vintage brassy jewelry, or you can go to your local crystal shop. Again, just kind of go through the questions in your head. Who owns this place? Who are the people that shop here? Where do they source their materials? What are their values? And that should give you a good answer of who to shop from. And find some stones that resonate with you. My personal favorites are rhodonite. That's like that was one of my first crystals I ever got, and it is very, very like amazing to me. And what is it called? I feel like when you go into a crystal shop or anything, you're looking for jewelry, just find like stones that really resonate with you, that really like that make you feel something. Lots of layered necklaces or rings, bracelets. Again, lots of layers, it's like maximalist flowiness. Layering jewelry and clothing is really key to this aesthetic. Again, we talked about dark martens or demonias are always a good bet for long skirt and boot combo. Earthy, natural shoes like strappy sandals, flip-flops, or barefoot, like we discussed before, if you want to go more the fairy grunge vibe rather than the Whimsigoth vibe. And when you're done getting dressed, do a Stevie Nicks twirl, or when you're done shopping at the thrift store and you're trying things on, do a Stevie Nicks twirl, and if you don't catch on fire, then you need more layers. That's gonna be yeah, you wanna cause a wind tunnel with all the flowiness that's happening in your outfit. So that is going to conclude this style analysis. I always feel like these videos are so short and then they end up being 30 minutes long, but I feel like I went through that so fast and I just want to keep talking about it because it's such a cute aesthetic. What do you guys think? Are you more of a fairy grunge or a whimsy goth? I think I'm more fairy grunge just because I really don't own a lot of black, and so it's hard for me to go that more goth aesthetic. So sticking with like earth tones and stuff works better for my style. But what do you guys think? What do y'all think of this aesthetic in general? I think it's a nice evolution from boho back then to something that's just more appropriate and nice. And comment down below what other aesthetics you'd like to see from me. As always, I have sort of a list in my head going that I want to cover, and I just like to hear what you guys want. And follow me on TikTok and Instagram, because not only do I post content there almost every single day, on my Instagram I ask you guys like your opinions on the topic that I'm covering, so you guys get to be included in my videos. So follow me on Instagram for that. Everything will be linked down below. And with that, have a happy day. Bye.